Hey everyone, this is Dr. Kanita on another episode on Arya Holistic Health. And here I have my good friend and teacher, Bryan Isacks. He introduced me to so many things actually. He was my Tai Chi teacher when I first started acupuncture school. And I remember after the semester ended, I was like, I kind of want to do more of this. Where can I go learn? And that kind of set me off in my journey with martial arts. And Bryan has been an amazing guide throughout that. And he even still is willing to talk to me after I graduated about all, acupuncture business, martial arts, stuff like that. So, Bryan, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, how you doing today? I know it's Easter.
It's funny when we booked it, I didn't realize. Fortunately, I got nothing going on. It's nice, relaxing, except for you. But yeah,
Yeah.
happy Easter, Shabbat Shalom, all those good things.
Yeah, I think because I'm like Buddhist, so I forgot to when I
Yeah,
scheduled it.
not really a thing for me either. So yeah,
Yes.
actually, the one good thing is that my office is guaranteed to be quiet on Easter Sunday. So
Oh, yes.
nobody's going to swing through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you at your office right now,
I
actually?
am
Or
at my office right now. I'm just in
Oh,
the little office that I do my paperwork in and stuff. But I
yeah.
figured it'd be good because it'd be quiet with no dogs or kids running around.
Yes,
And if we
that's
ended up
perfect.
doing qigong, I can flip the camera around and we can do movement if we need to.
Oh, excellent. I love it.
Yeah.
And so you do treatment there, and then you also do teaching your Qigong stuff there too?
Yeah, so this is I own the building I'm in, and I have several treatment rooms, and then we have
Mhm.
chiropractic and massage in the building
Oh.
here. And we do have a fairly open space that sometimes
Mhm.
I meet and do private training in. It's not
Mm,
space enough for like a class environment.
I see, I see.
For classes, I often will create like a short-term rental contract, or I'll do it outside if I can,
Yeah,
because that's the best, right?
yes, outside Qigong.
With the Ba Gua classes, Ba Gua Zhang, the martial art that I teach, we actually train that year round outside. So winter and
Oh.
everything.
Oh, wow, okay. You gotta build up the chi for the
Yeah.
outside,
And
especially in
real
the
fire.
winter.
Yeah, we always had a fire in the back.
Yes, yes. Well, it's perfect for the winter time because you
Yeah.
guys have a lot of harsher winters than we do in good old Maryland here.
Yeah. It's not that far north, but it really feels like a whole different thing.
Yeah, it really does. Um, Sorry, you froze a little bit, Bryan. Let me see.
Uh, you can
Oh,
hear
there you
me.
go. Yep,
Oh,
I
there
can
we
hear
go.
you. Yes, yes. So, just to give a little bit info for everyone out there, obviously, I know that you teach the Ba Gua Zhang. So, what else do you teach, or tell us a little bit about all the fun martial arts stuff you do?
Sure. Well, I started in martial arts very young. I began in Washin Ryu karate, and throughout most of my early life, I did sort of what you think of when you think of martial arts: hard external stuff, lots of sparring and fighting and things.
Yes.
And in my very early 20s, I was exposed to internal Chinese martial arts. What happened was that I had gotten injured for like the third consecutive time in one quarter, and
Yeah.
I was kind of looking for something different. And I ended up finding my way to a guy who taught Northern Long Fist and Tai
Hmm.
Chi. He did a traditional Yang form of Tai Chi. His name was Rex Burnson.
Hmm.
And it really kind of turned my head around. So I started learning as much about Chinese martial arts and Qigong as I could. I was about 20 years old.
Hmm.
That led me to finding my first serious Qigong teacher, who's a man named Binhui
Mm.
He. We called him Master Binhui He, but he was a Qigong doctor from Hong Kong. And he was actually one of the first, and to my knowledge, only Qigong practitioners that's done a fairly rigorous amount of lab research. He was
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and the research is still out there, and you can actually meet with the doctors that worked with him.
Mhm.
One of them is named Kevin Chen,
Mhm.
still active and out in the world. But anyway, long story short, the path led me to Tom Bizio, who you know.
Yes.
I started. I actually was sent by the college to sort of improve my Tui Na so I could be one of the Tui Na teachers at the college.
Oh, Finger Lakes. So
Yeah,
okay.
so I was sent to learn Junggu Tui Na, which no longer as a company exists, but the lineage and teachers are all out there still,
Mhm.
which is taught by Frank Butler and Tom Bizio.
Mhm.
And meeting them was a really profound, eye-opening experience for me because they were the first teachers, other than Ben Hui He, that I had that could embody the principles that I'd come to really be looking for
Mhm.
within the Chinese
Mhm.
internal arts. So, of course, I was hooked, and I've been training and learning and teaching under them since 2010.
Mhm.
So the martial arts that I teach foundational Ba Gua Zhang, which is 8 diagram palm under the Internal Arts International lineage. That's Tom Bizio's
Mhm.
lineage.
Mhm.
And if you're interested, it's a very active site. Tom Bizio is still a very active teacher. So
Mhm.
a lot of resources available to check that out. Maybe we can post like a link in the.
Yeah. What's it called? It's like international.
It's
Internal.
internalartinternational.com
Okay.
is the website for the lineage in America of our sort of overarching organization.
Mm.
I also teach several different styles of Qigong. I've been authorized to teach 8 pieces of brocade, 5-element Qigong, Tian Gan or heavenly stem Qigong, which is a spinal. Well, you know all these well, but for everybody,
Yes.
it's sort of a spinal twisting Qigong where we use different body movements
Mhm.
to open different levels of the spine.
Mhm.
Uh, the Shaolin sinew changes, or
Yes.
when we teach them in Quan, we call them the hand strengthening,
Yes.
but it's a very traditional set. Among several others, I could go on with them. And I also was authorized to teach the Yang 24 form, which is a Beijing Physical Institute form from a man named Zhang Ke.
Mhm.
He was my first serious Tai Chi teacher.
Mm.
I've gotten the opportunity to train and study several martial arts in the interim period. Currently, I'm a proud white belt at Ithaca Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So my martial arts journey is never going to end. I'm
Yeah.
in my mid-40s, and I don't see it.
Yeah.
So.
You look vibrant and full of chi, Bryan, still.
I try.
We gotta keep
Proud of
going.
you, Kanita. You're a rock star. So.
No, I'm trying. I'm trying to.
For Kanita's podcast listeners, she probably hasn't said this, so I'm going to say it. She's what we called, way back when she was a student, we called her a unicorn because she was able to complete the Doctor of Chiropractic, the Master of Science in our herbal program, which we at the time called the Master of Science in Oriental Medicine, and then also acupuncture. And she did it all with flying colors. Yeah, whoever's getting treatment from her, you're getting the best.
Yeah, thank you. No, I had a great teacher like you and everyone, the ergos, all that stuff. I had a great time with you. I mean, the time I did it too was the best time because it's like you have no responsibilities. I just committed myself to all that learning.
It's true. One of the things I've realized about myself is I kind of am. I love being a new student, and so the idea of the podcast is talking about how martial arts and qigong can improve your life and health and practice. But one of the things that I've found most beneficial is constantly getting to engage in beginner's mind, and being new is my personal addiction. I think I love doing stuff and learning it all.
Yeah, I see. I didn't know you were getting into the jujitsu, and that's so funny because I mean, you know my seafood too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah, and he's, I feel like a similar mindset where he is teaching now jujitsu because he started to get really into it and all that stuff, but he's still doing his martial arts stuff in the Hanga as well.
Well, it's interesting because I wouldn't say I avoided Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as a martial artist, but it never presented itself to me. And I was so focused on learning and practicing Ba Gua and Sheng Yi that, it wasn't on my radar. But what happened was that, that old expression that when you're ready, a teacher will find you.
Yes.
It was funny because it was a little bit pre-pandemic when I started thinking to myself, like, man, what I really want is just some body-to-body contact again. But I don't want to get knocked out anymore.
Anymore.
I got punched in the head enough. I probably don't do math so well anymore. So I decided that I wanted a lot of contact, but not getting knocked out. And the only way I knew how to do that was to find a close quarter grappling art. I was looking, Ithaca has a very old I think it's one of the oldest judo clubs in America.
Oh, okay.
But as a, guy in his 40s, the thought of, getting put down on the mat from 6 feet hard 100 times a class,
it didn't quite appeal to you.
I've got a lot of falling practice in my history, but the chance of injury goes up, right? So I started thinking about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And one of the things that really intrigued me about it is there's a fairly famous Chinese martial arts practitioner on the West Coast. I'd say a kind of contemporary of our teacher, Tom. His name is Tim Cartmel, but he actually has a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he's figured out interesting ways that those arts merge together. And so it intrigued me, and a wonderful teacher named Matt Lee appeared in my life at the right moment. Matt Sung Lee is a former UFC fighter, and he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach. So I'm by no means done with the Chinese internal arts. They're main practice daily, but it's a wonderful way to explore how to apply resistance to the structures that we spend so much time creating in these martial arts.
Oh, my dog appeared.
Your Ba Gua either, which is
yes. Oh, okay. My dog decided to make an appearance.
Yeah. If I'd been home, you guys would have all met both my dogs and kids, probably.
And kids, that would have been fine. We welcome everyone to the show. Well, that's really cool. I'm still in that frame of mind where I like the jiu-jitsu. That stuff doesn't quite appeal to me. So when I first started doing, I actually started with, I think I told you, like Thai boxing when I was in middle school. I think I just had so much angst that I just needed to punch things. Yes. I think that's why I like tennis so much, because it's just like hitting stuff. But anyways, they also had, it was like Master Mike Moses at Evolve Academy where I first learned Thai boxing, and he did jiu-jitsu too. But, as a kid, especially a young woman, you're like, I really don't want to roll with other sweaty men on the mat.
I mean, I'm 6 feet tall and 230, and I still don't really like getting smashed. So I get that too.
But I had a friend who is like my size, just a little bit taller, and she was like amazing at jiu-jitsu just because she had technique, and she would beat guys all the time. I was like, wow. But it still doesn't quite appeal to me yet. But maybe, like you said, if the right teacher appears, then I might start it, but I don't know.
It's the kind of thing where martial arts and Qigong practice, especially when you spend time in the internal arts for a while, one of the things that happens is that you start to see that, to me, Chinese internal arts are like working on the source code.
I love that.
Fundamental movement patterns that can apply to anything. It's fascinating to me how once you start to understand how the movement patterns come out with consistent training, you can see it in world-class tennis players. You can see it in people golfing and, skiing. All kinds of different movement patterns can be found where you're utilizing these core, body dynamics.
You're going to love. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No. It was really funny because I had a patient who is a tennis coach, and I actually train with him now because he speaks our language in terms of Chinese medicine. Where he doesn't, I forget what he does. He does some qigong, like some, I can't remember what. He's really interested in Ba Gua because he does move like that when I look at him, and he's like, "Kanita, I could tell just from how you play you've done martial arts because of like how I move." And it is true because I think of like, oh, this is just like bow and arrow stance too. We're just shooting
Totally.
the dantian forward. And he's like, all right, think of it this way. When you hit a ball, think of hitting your dantian that way. Or if you want to angle it, think about shooting your dantian. I was like, oh, it makes sense.
Well, it's wild how you start to see it in everything,
Yeah.
Well, and that's the beauty of Ba Gua Zhang in particular, is you really are, I think, mimicking in some ways the natural ways that things change in a planetary perspective. Not to get too woo-woo about
No, I
it, but
love it.
really, like, it's based upon the I Ching, right? And so
Yes.
the idea that energy shifts and changes in this relatively, let's say, predictably unpredictable way, where
Yes.
different transmutations of things lead to other sort of body patterns, and so
Mhm.
it's a very beautiful, profound martial art that I mean,
Mhm.
I've been training with Tom for oh, about 12 years now.
Mhm.
I feel like I'm
Mhm.
just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's it's uh it's incredible too, because people often will recognize some dynamic of movement and they'll say, "Oh, that looks like fill in the blank," and
Mhm.
you realize that that's just one of the 8 changes, you know what I mean?
Mm.
Might at some point look
Mm.
much more yielding and soft and
Mhm.
gentle. Other times you
Mhm.
can express harder dynamic energy that's
Yeah.
very young or forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that's what I really love about the so the if I say Negia, I mean the internal arts,
Mhm.
But that's what I really love about the Negia, is that you're playing with these sort of fundamental movement
Movement.
patterns that apply
Mhm.
to everything,
Yeah.
from health to athletic performance to, of course,
Yes.
martial arts.
Yes. Yes. I think sorry, I'm gonna kick my dog out real quick.
No problem.
And she's gonna start barking and stuff. Here. I interrupt this program.
It's okay. While she's playing with her dog, I'll tell you stories about her. No, never mind. I won't.
No, Brian. None of that.
Kanita was always so like on the ball at school. I don't think I even have anything that could embarrass you anyway.
Just getting hit in the face a couple times too. But
Yeah,
that's okay.
all martial artists have got a story about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, you bring up a really interesting thing. I think it's hard. I'm sure you teach like some of the qigong to your patients to help, but when you say like the internal arts or the neja helping with fundamental movements, I guess that's almost like, because there's rehab that focuses on different things of like squatting and deadlifting. Let's, for example, we'll say that overhead. So um trying to get at like what I mean, what question I'm trying to ask, but I guess how do you like explain that to a patient that's like, oh, like it seems so simple, but how can it help
Well,
me?
I think that one of the things that I've sort of explored as a clinician over years, I've been a clinician about as long as I've been a serious, trainer of this stuff.
Hmm.
So one of the things that I've come across is there's a fundamental difference, but also it's the same thing. All right.
Yes, I know.
But to me, you've got ideas about rehab,
Yes,
rehabilitation of an injured structure in the body,
yes.
which may include things like fundamental movement patterns, right?
Hmm.
So, I mean, like if a person is having trouble getting out of their car, looking at like what structures do they need fundamental movement pattern training to help
Hmm.
them get back from a negative number to baseline, right?
Yeah.
um, similar to that is like prehab, which I think starts getting into a different realm of what I think of as optimization, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, for instance, if you have a person who's essentially going to recover fully from their injury, realistically, whether they see you or not, right? But they're maybe an athlete, or they're a person who at least has like a kind of fundamental minimum requirement that they want to achieve, but they feel like they can't get to yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I start looking at slightly more advanced ideas of how to escalate their training rather than just bring them back to baseline. And then finally, you've got, kind of full on athletic sort of optimization where it's like you have a sports specific training model, or you're trying to build some fundamental movement patterns into a person that will just enhance their athletic performance.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? So
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
when I have a patient who, let's say they're around my age, and they in our area we have a pretty thriving triathlete.
Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Triathletes, we've got some pro level triathletes around here.
Wow.
They have a lot of triathlon oriented fitness professionals in the area.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at that particular set of requirements of the body, they already have an enormous amount of information available to them on how to run better,
Mm-hmm.
how to cycle more efficiently, and how to use their body as efficiently as possible in the water, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what they often don't have is a whole lot of injury prevention.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I think is really interesting and cool about the Negia is that really, when you're talking about, say, squats, that can be made into an internal practice by simply adding in breath work and focused intention.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're looking at, let's say, we have the technique, this as well, mud walking, or
Yes.
motion sort of walk practice, if you will.
Yes.
Any runner can benefit from doing this because it's going to cause all the small muscles and fascia and ligaments and tendons in their small areas of their ankles and stuff to track properly.
Mm-hmm.
And the slower they do it, the more of a workout they're going to feel they're having. So it's sort of scalable to almost any athletic level.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have literally 75, 80-year-old people doing it for balance practice.
Mm.
And they might be doing it in the same day as a 25-year-old triathlete doing an Ironman in Hawaii or something. So that's one of the ways that I think we can incorporate this into our overall health.
Yeah,
right.
I love it. I think when because I've given the slow walk, and I've been given the slow walk for myself to help with my knee. But it's like they don't realize how when they first do it, I'm like, no, you try it. You try, like I'll coach you through it, and they're like, oh my gosh, like they start feeling everything that's like you said, the small muscles in their feet and their ankle, and they're like, oh, okay, wait a second, there might be something to this.
It's really, really funny, actually. It's become one of my favorite things is to watch folks who've watched a movement pattern, go into it thinking, why am I even bothering doing something so easy? And then you see them shaking and
yes,
because it's hard. It's hard to do things with full, if you've got your breath connected to your movement, you're practicing relatively, I don't want to say perfect, because which of us are, right? But you're trying to practice from full alignment with full conscious awareness of every part of your body moving. I mean, something as simple as walking becomes pretty hard.
Like I remember that Qigong, the lung Qigong that I give a lot, and I'm sure for like all sorts of things. But I tell people, I'm like, of course you can just wave your arms and do this, right? But that's not the point. It's feeling like those internal connections, the shoulder, your lungs, that you can actually feel your organs have a movement too, which I did the Zhang Fu Tuina with Tom too. And I was just amazed. Let me tell you, like, I'm gonna give Tom is like an alien. He's like, it's like crazy the way he teaches. Because it's almost like I remember when he was like, "Oh, do you really have to get in tune or like really listen to your body?" And I think that's something um, that's hard to teach and hard for people to really connect to because we spend a lot of time kind of like ignoring things.
Sure. And one of the ways that Tom Bizzio teaches that I think once you experience it, you get it, but until
Yes.
you experience it, it's difficult to explain to people, is that he teaches by transmission, which is a very
Yes.
traditional way to pass these things on. So it's one thing to sort of watch me in a video, do something. It's quite another to feel somebody who's been practicing for a long time, feel their back and feel exactly where that movement
Mm.
from.
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget, absolutely never forget the first day of Xing Yi training with Tom Bizzio. He opened up a cohort where we were to come and train every weekend for 2 years, or not every weekend, but one weekend every month or
Month or
couple
two.
months.
Yeah.
Yeah. And basically the training sessions were, we would have lunch, but they were like 8-hour-long days, a couple days in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And so you would get a lot of movement in your body over that kind of duration.
Yeah.
And then, you would go home and practice an hour a day, and then you would come back and you would receive corrections and move on to the next thing. So class 1, day 1, none of us know each other, and I think at some point I turned to somebody and I said something along the lines of like, I'm looking forward to standing and shaking with you, we all laughed because we all kind of knew what we were getting into.
Yeah.
So what happened was that Tom is demonstrating, and this is actually, you can watch these sequences on his website. It's the Siba Fa Tu Na, the 4 methods breathing from our Xing Yi lineage. And he demonstrates it, and you can see that there's a lot of movement happening in his spine. You can see it with your eyes, but it's subtle looking. Then he says, okay, now come feel my back. And so sort of all at once and one at a time, we're all kind of clamoring to put our hands on Bizzio's back. And what you feel can only be described as like an inchworm moving, but it's very strong, more like a snake than an inchworm, moving up both sides of his spine. And it's a set of movements that you've never felt before in your life. Like you've never felt anybody's back do that. You certainly haven't felt your back do that.
Yeah. You freak out.
Well, you're just like, and you'll put a hand somewhere on his body and you can feel exactly what he is teaching you.
Yeah.
And that's the transmission,
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting because if you look at how these things are trained, a lot of times what you see isn't what you're actually doing. The visible sort of movement, like you said, it's just, we're just kind of waving our arms around. But when you combine breath, focused mind, and correct body alignments with movement, something magic happens. That's when you start developing both body awareness at a really, really different level than we normally use. And also you can develop functionality in new ways,
Yeah, I think people will see, like you say, improvement, because I definitely see the improvement in just even my tennis, doing and it's not even about, it's just consistency. It's just about keeping up with it. I think it's the hardest part for people to do. It's hard to do all the things we want to do one day.
Well, with patients, I always say, the best thing we can do is have a very small dosage of one thing that is really critical, and just make sure to do that a little bit every day. Because it's true. There's a point where you get more training than you can do in a day, and then you have to start making decisions about what you're prioritizing and everything.
I have a funny story to tell you. I don't know if I told you this, but it was when I was doing like one of Tom's, like, I think it's like lower body classes, orthopedic stuff. And I was with Wes, which is, I know, one of your classmates. And Wes, I'm going to shout out to him because he's an amazing martial artist Yeah,
I mean, Wes may be sort of like one of my training brothers, but we both know where we stand. Wes is really, to me, one of my teachers. Yeah. I owe an enormous gratitude to Wes.
Yes, I do too. I hope he listens to this later, but yeah, we talk a lot and he's taught me a lot too. He always inspires me because if you see his training calendar, it's
Oh,
ridiculous.
Wes is like one of these people where I think to know him is to be inspired to be a better
Yes.
person.
Yes,
Like
absolutely.
whenever I feel myself sort of slipping and my training, when you train long enough, you're going to have sort
Mm,
of waves
mhm,
deep commitment with really serious practice that
mhm.
but then there are other times where you start to you slip in a little.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whenever
I've
that
done that
happens,
too.
I usually shoot Wes a text,
Yes.
and I'm just like, what are you working on lately? And by the end of the discussion, I'm inspired to train harder.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. I feel the same way when I talk to him too. I'm like, Wes, you inspire me. You're so cool. He's like, I don't have many people tell me
Oh, who
that.
knows? I mean, anybody who trains that rigorously and can perform at the level he can,
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, he is absolutely the embodiment of what,
Mhm.
a true martial artist,
Yes.
in my opinion, is.
Yes.
But you
If
had a
he
story about him.
Yes, yes, yes.
I want to
No,
hear that. I
he
love
was in the class with me, and then, like, I think Tom was demonstrating how to kinda, like, put intention in the needling and, like, how he does it. So he uses me, and he does stomach 36, and, like, Wes laughs so hard at me because I like, to get needled by Tom is also very interesting because it just shot up my whole body,
Yeah, he's
and my
got
eyes just went like, and Wes was, like, laughing at me. He's like, "Oh my god, I saw that happen."
uh, I'll tell you, being the ortho needling dummy for any high level needler is definitely like a sweaty, kind of intense experience. I remember I had Frank Butler, who's another kind of
Yes.
legendary Qigong martial arts guy in our field, and acupuncture in
Yes.
particular, both acupuncture and herbs. But and Frank was doing an orthopedic needling demo. I want to say it was for the shoulder, but it
Mhm.
was it was. I don't even remember where we were at that point. But in any case, I have my shirt off. There's a video camera on me. He's doing points like under my scapula, like
Oh, yeah.
crazy, like subscapularis releases going like straight down from
Woo!
like sliding sort of between the scapula and the lung. And at some point the camera's trained right on my armpit. And somebody told me that you could see these beads of sweat just forming. It's intense. Yeah.
It's so
No,
funny.
they do. They got chi, these guys.
Yeah, that the last story, but it's the same thing where we were doing, I'm sure you've done this where like Tom was long axis to structure the ankle and I was on Wes's ankle doing like the needling.
Mhm.
And it's amazing what Tom can feel because he just shifted with me with the needle. And I was like, woo! I was like, oh, that's so cool.
Well, I'll tell you one more fun story about that kind of thing with Tom is I remember we were actually practicing push hands, which is a kind of a
Hmm.
moving, I don't know, a game where you're feeling you and your partner's
Hmm.
energy sort of transmitting
Hmm.
in this circle, right? And there was some point where Tom came over and one of us was doing something a little bit incorrectly, and Tom looks at me for a minute. He's like, it's all stopping right there. And so he grabs the other guy facing me, gives a little impulse through the guy, goes through that guy's arm, through my arm, and then sets my neck.
Oh my God. He's,
That
oh
happened.
my
This is a true story that happened to me. And then he looks like this. He looks at me, kind of smirks, and walks away. He's like, boom, mic drop.
He's
I
mic
was like,
drop.
I'm standing there staring at him, like jaw drop. Like,
That's next level, using someone else's body to set you.
I mean, it's a funny thing, but the longer I train with him, the more that I see
Mhm.
what is happening is he can see where everything is stopping,
Yes.
and so it's like there's this movement that's coming through the whole structure,
Mhm.
And with years and years of training and practice, both feeling it in your own body as a practitioner and a trainer of this stuff, but also as a clinician looking at it on others,
Mhm.
it does get to a point where something's not moving has just sort of got like a shining
Yeah.
ball on
Yeah,
it.
it's, like, very obvious to you at that point. I mean, Frank also has that ability to
Oh
just
yeah,
see,
no doubt.
like yeah. I'm just like, "What is he seeing?" Sometimes he'll just say stuff like, "I what? He just looked at his ankle, figured out all this
Yeah.
stuff."
I mean, it's one of these things where I think that that's another benefit of doing Chinese internal training is that it gives you this ability to both see and feel things at a more sort of subtle, discreet level
Yes.
over time, you know?
Yeah. I think that was, what, my next question, getting to and you kinda talked about it throughout, um, this episode too, is how the internal arts has affected your understanding of Chinese medicine,
Mm,
acupuncture, Chinese herbs, and you kinda touched upon it. It's, like, really especially with the acupuncture, right? It's, like, feeling the when we do the needling, it's, like, the intention, the breath too of, like, that connection with the patient and figuring out what's going on with them. Would you say that's true for you?
absolutely. It's one of these things where I feel like acupuncture is a craft, it's a physical sort of an art and a science that is done with one's hands. And so if you practice any kind of body awareness and movement based sort of training, what happens is that for me, it becomes this tactile sort of it's like playing a game of push hands with the soft tissue.
Mm.
You gently introduce a little bit of movement into a structure, very gently, sometimes so gently that the patient doesn't really record that you're moving them, right?
Mhm.
And you can feel with practice, and it's not mystical, by the way. Like one thing
Mhm.
that I think all young when I was young, I shouldn't speak for other practitioners, but when I was young, I viewed it as something other than the body, that it was this sort of mystical energy that
Mm.
could somehow gain power over if I trained enough. And as I get older and I train longer, I realize that this is our body.
Yeah.
The chi and the body are not, you know,
Yeah.
separated. So for me, the idea that with training, one can slowly kind of unravel and see where things aren't moving is very much what my internal practice uh, is informing my acupuncture with.
Mm.
Certainly, the ability to then use the correct dosage with acupuncture is another thing that I think training and time builds. Because, a lot of younger practitioners will be very strong and they can get chi. We describe the sensation of, getting the chi, which is that, any acupuncture patient will at some point experience it. It's that kind of heavy, pressurized, aching, shocking, tingling, warming
Mhm.
sort of sensation the needling generates.
Mhm.
It's different from just a poke, right?
Mhm.
Um, but getting the correct dosage of chi and then making it move in the direction you're
Mm.
trying to is where a lot of the refinement I think comes in.
Mhm.
And it's a craft, So to me, one of the things that I always think about is that it's not dissimilar from being like an auto mechanic.
Mhm.
Like when I go take my car in, my auto mechanic is like the Tom Bizzio of cars,
Yes.
He's
Just,
a
like, tinkering and
and he's not like some Autobahn based guy. He's just like a guy out in the woods. He
yeah.
just can like look and feel an engine and understand what's going on. But
Mm.
he makes you stand around with them. That's the hard part. You got to hang out with them. And incidentally, this guy is a serious martial artist.
Oh, really? That's funny.
But he'll stand just sort of looking at my car. Sometimes it's running or whatever, and he'll kind of like tap on something, and then he'll wiggle something, then he's looking for another few, sometimes for like 5 minutes this guy's just standing there,
Mhm.
and then he takes a line and he goes. And it's interesting because I think it's identical to what
That's
we
so
do.
cool. Very interesting. Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I think, being what am I like? fifth year in practice. Kind of crazy. Oh my god,
Yeah, you're
fifth year, fifth year in practice, and it's as I'm trying to do more training. I don't know if I told you, but I started doing more Ba Gua too.
hey, good for
Doing
you.
online, yeah. West's influence a little bit. But also I've always wanted to learn, I was always super interested in it. Um, I'm in a lower slump of it too, where I'm like, but I have kept up with the seasonal Qigong. I will say that. That's been very interesting too.
Then you're doing perfect. Well, that's the thing. You just gotta, you gotta keep the candle lit.
Yes.
Sometimes you're
Yes.
busy, you've got stuff happening.
Yeah.
Maybe you only have time to do one thing, but as long as you keep the training going, you'll keep at it.
Yeah, I think the good thing of all the more disciplined I was in school and that was a different environment is that when I do go off it, I will feel a difference. So I know when I don't do it, I'm like, oh. then I get back on it. I was like, oh, this is why I kept doing it for all this time, which
I
is
get it.
helpful. Yep.
Now, the
And
older
so
I get, the more like essential it is for me to
yeah.
not get injured. Is one thing.
Yes. Yes.
I was in my 20s and 30s, I could kind of do whatever and not really worry too much about injury. Now I feel like without the Neigong practice, I'm at risk. Like
Hmm.
I can really feel how brittle I get if I'm not keeping blood flowing. And
In the area, yeah. Yeah, so I think all the qigong, also, with Tom's influence too, with talking to you, talking to Wes, and trying to incorporate more of the Bagua stuff. I like learn more about body connection, and I thought it was really interesting. You said like the dosage of chi. I was like, oh, I never thought of it, but I can kind of see what you mean when you're like just trying to get enough, or
yeah,
trying to bring chi into the so let's say there's a lack of energy or chi or whatever you want to call it in a specific area. You're trying to bring it there versus dispersing it if it feels like too full. Um, so I didn't think about it that way. That's really cool.
well, if not to take it too far into the technical, if you've got patients watching or something like that, but if you think about the 8 principle sort of diagnostic model, the
Hmm.
very first one really we learn,
Yes.
it really does boil down, in my opinion, to that. Is the area replete, which to a patient that would be like a spasm, or you've
Yeah.
got some kind of myofascial trigger point or an adhesion. We
Yes.
all know what replete chi feels,
Yeah.
you know. Or is it vacuous? Is it sort of hypo functioning
Hmm.
and flaccid? Or conversely, it might be like
Hmm.
a hard
Hmm.
log of spasm with no
Yeah.
blood flow through it.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I think is really interesting is that, so if you take something everybody understands, like electricity, right?
Hmm.
We use
Hmm.
electrical stimulation.
Hmm.
When I first started training acupuncture, the general sort of strategy was just like juice them up as hard as you can. It was.
Yeah.
It was like take, take the leads, stick them on the
Yeah.
nails, and turn the thing up until they're like having a spasm. And then over time, research kind of came out that it's like actually the less you do, the more effect you can get. So it's like now
Mm.
things like microstem and very very gentle currents of electricity seem to work
Mhm.
better than the kind of old
Mhm.
school just like strip your plug from your lamp and stick it on the needle
Yeah.
thing.
I
And
love it.
so, I mean, I think that actually that's a principle that I started to detect almost
Mm.
everywhere in my physical training, is that I generally make more progress with myself when I do the minimum effective dose of something
Mhm.
rather than, trying to leave it all on the road every single time. And I think
Yeah.
that that is a fundamental training principle of Chinese martial arts.
Mm. Mhm.
If you're training to failure, or for instance, if you're doing Bagua, maybe you've learned the sort of twisting down posture where you sink down with your knees
Mhm.
kind of wrapped around each other.
Mhm.
um, that crouching stance, if you do that over and over and over again until your legs fail, you're probably not going to train that for a
Mhm.
few days.
Yes.
If you
Yes.
do a little of that of every day, it's remarkable how much strength you can build without ever feeling smoked or
Yeah.
exhausted.
Yeah.
So one of the rules of thumb for both acupuncture and my own personal training is I try to leave people feeling, and myself, a little better after I do something rather than exhausted and
Yeah.
smoked. Ready.
Just like stem them to the max.
Yeah. Well, like you think of like with adjusting or something like this, the kind of big hero set
Yeah.
that the
Yeah.
Chinese talk about.
Yeah.
Right.
I've changed a lot with that aspect too. Just like if it wants to go, it will go, but don't like force things to.
And so for patients, that's something I'm always advocating for with them is that, I do have a lot of athletes in my practice, and I respect athletes who have the mental discipline to essentially, give everything to their sport. But I try to encourage them to understand that actually, you might perform better than you are now if you take a more moderate approach to your training, wave cycle your routine, have, minimum effective dose days, and then have other days where you test your, your performance, but don't just try to give it your all every single time because you're gonna end up getting injured. It's an inevitability,
Yes, absolutely. I think that's super important to remind them of that. And I can kind of relate. Like I'm I'm trying to get better at tennis and be more competitive, but like you said, the minimal dosage of like, okay, if you didn't get enough sleep, for
Oh yeah.
example, right? Or you didn't, drink enough water, or you feel like crap and you're like, okay, you forced yourself to train and you're going to perform way worse instead of like, okay, I'm going to rest today, take it easy. And then, maybe do a little bit more training tomorrow. Cause I probably play maybe once or twice a week. And then I do, I do the Qigong and then I do other strength training, but it's not to failure.
Yeah.
But I notice my skill level does improve and your endurance improves too when you're not overtraining too much.
When I think of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, there are a lot of guys in the class that are real, they're like former wrestlers actually.
Yeah.
And wrestlers, anybody who's ever been around them, they train hard, like they're
Yes.
trained kind of people. And so these guys have like explosive strength and they leave everything on the mat, And the reality is that it doesn't actually get you results in jiu-jitsu faster to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll get better at maybe like dominating another body. That's true. Like you could get like explosive and strong and everything. But the principles of jiu-jitsu are actually more similar to Chinese martial arts. Relaxation, structure, good base, having intelligent sort of use of leverage. All of those things are what jiu-jitsu really is about. And I found that the two things that, not to say that I'm improving any better than anybody, if any poor guys are watching, trust me.
I know.
Like, one of the things I find is that I definitely am getting injured less than people my age in there. I haven't been, knock on wood, I haven't been seriously injured in
That's
like
great.
2 years of training.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that it allows you to focus on what it is you're trying to learn rather than, just like it becoming a gritty kind of an endurance feat every time you practice, which I think is sustainable for most people.
Yeah, even though I am younger than you but I'm in my 30s now, I will say that.
That's when it starts.
Yes, right? It's like I like start to feel stuff. But I was thinking about like when I did do a little bit of like the Krav Maga and all that stuff, and those guys, as you know, do hardcore stuff. And then there's me. They're like, why are you going harder? I'm like, I don't need to. Because I don't want to get injured. I was like, I have to work the next day. I can't just, my job is physical too. I can't just like start hammering and killing myself. And it was weird. I had to tell them that. They're like, what? They didn't understand.
I mean, how many athletes have you, or let's say civilian athletes, patients really, have you worked with where they're training for a sport like they're getting paid for it? You know, I mean, if I were going to potentially win like a $10 million purse with my jujitsu, I'd train
Yeah.
harder, you know, but
Yeah.
I'm not. That's never going to
Yeah.
happen for me.
Yeah.
So it's I mean, realistically, like sport specific training is something that I see all the time. And sometimes people don't necessarily realize that they're training for a sport, you know.
Mm.
Like I think there's a lot of good things about workout modalities like CrossFit, but one of the
Yeah.
things that happens is that the exercise is the sport, right?
Yeah.
So they're
Oh
doing
yeah.
like, you know, Olympic lifting
Hmm.
combined with something else, and that's
Yeah.
their workout that day. And so I find that sort of interesting and challenging, because CrossFit folks definitely can get fit quickly, but
Yes.
you know, I think it's always useful to ask yourself, like, why am I training this way? What am I
Yes.
trying to achieve?
Yes.
99.9% of us want to look good with our shirts off. I mean,
Yes.
that's reasonable, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of things do
Yes.
that. But if you're trying to train in a way where you're, you know, fully mobile and feeling fantastic at,
Yes.
say, 70, that's kind of a different training model. And I think that a lot of people aren't looking at things that way.
Mm.
Whereas
Hmm.
when you went to China, we trained in the same park in Hangzhou, I
Yes.
think, right?
Yes. Yes.
You know, and remember how many, God, like thousands of
That was, I
people,
mean, it filled up by 7 a.m., right? It was just
yeah,
like
7 a.m.
insane.
They're walking, slapping their
Yeah.
hands, they're
Yep.
hanging from tree branches, they're, you know, rolling against
Hmm.
plastic kind of
Yeah.
roller things. It's a different sort of training idea to be fit, mobile, and healthy than it is to
Mm.
be elite in some sport mode, you know?
Yeah. That you aren't getting paid for.
On the other hand, sports give us focus. They give us
Yes.
a good focused
Yes.
mind. So
But I think that's a great point you make in terms of just figuring out your focus and your goals and like what do you want to do with this training? For me, for example, it's like I just want to get to a 5 in like tennis. There's a ratings, right? From 2.5 to like pro level 10 plus, but I just want to get to a 5.0 and I would be because I know at this age I'm not going to go pro. Like there's no way.
I mean, it's a useful thing, that because like I certainly train with guys who do think that they're going to be the next UFC fighter. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like
mhm.
it happens where folks, even sometimes unintentionally, they're like, I could go pro.
Mhm.
You know,
Yes.
like
Yeah, to me, I mean,
yeah,
that'd be cool. But I was like, I want to get this level where it's like I'm really, really competitive and I keep that until right when I'm like 70-ish. And I think that's why like with the why I want to get into the Ba Gua because it is more for like other than being a really awesome martial arts, it is for longevity,
yeah.
for my health that I want to keep mobile and have good health throughout my life and not be in so much pain.
I mean, I have a fair number of mid-70s patients who play tennis, racquetball,
Yes.
pickleball. I think tennis is a great sport for
Yeah.
like aging into it. It's a little hard on the knees, but
Yeah, that's why pickleball has become very popular because it's kind of like it's almost like badminton, ping pong, and tennis.
they use a wiffle ball, right?
Yes, but
Yeah, I've never tried it, but it looks
yeah,
interesting.
the court is like I played it once and I was like, "Oh, this is really fun." And it's not all about like smashing. Even though I want to, but
Yeah.
but
You
it's like more about
take it
finesse and
right
touch.
into some white
Yep, just
lady's face.
sorry. But yeah, the
Oops.
net is small is shorter, the court is smaller, and so it relies more on like reflexes. But it's become just more widely popular now. And I do treat he's like 70 something. I love this guy. He's in his 70s. He'll beat 55-year-olds in pickleball. He's really, really good. And he's in like the Hall of Fame in softball. Like this guy is amazing, like at 70 something. But his goal was like, I just want to keep moving, finding stuff for him that he likes to do and enjoys and gets him out of the house. So I thought that was awesome.
I think
Um,
that's the real long-term benefit of being a sport player, you know, is that you have this motivation to keep fit and moving,
yes.
you know.
Yes. I love it. Oh, I just remember the question I had for you when you were talking about kind of like less is more.
Mhm.
And I think Tom talked about a little bit with acupuncture retention. So I guess like in your clinic, what have you seen? Because I actually think, with let's say you're doing something orthopedic, like a shoulder,
Mm.
sprain or a frozen shoulder, how long do you actually leave the needles in for? Do you kind of get the
Uh,
sensation and then leave it for a couple minutes? Because now I almost do like a shorter retention time for that reason, and I think it's still really good.
I think that needle retention times in my experience of acupuncturists in the West are too
Hmm.
long. I think that
Hmm.
like you remember when you were in China, it wasn't like a spa over there, right?
Nope.
Like 100
They
people.
lay it all out. They don't care.
And so, I mean, I tend to follow the kind of classic recommendations on it, which I believe are 12 or 24. They're in like factors of 12-minute
Oh,
blocks.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I remember this.
And I mean, one of the things that I've seen is that the more replete, generally speaking, I mean, obviously there's mixed patterns and things
Yeah,
get
yeah.
complicated, but the more replete and young and healthy, so basically the more chi is bound up, the less dose you need.
Hmm.
The more vacuous or hypo functioning
Hmm.
or old,
Hmm.
the kind of more gentle, long treatment I'll do.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, I mean, I think that in general, like if you're working with a young athlete, you might go anywhere from just, release the thing and then it's out
Hmm.
to like a relatively short dosage of time. But of course, it depends, like
Yeah, yeah,
some injuries require more time, spine injuries, for instance, require more
yeah,
needles.
yeah. That's a good versus like limb stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, and I
just
mean, look, it just depends on the structure, really,
yeah,
because shoulders, like you can make people, as like they'll pass out if you blast them
yes.
harder too long on their shit. So,
Whoops,
yeah,
but yeah, there are a lot of shoulders lately because of the springtime. You know that.
it's shoulder season.
Yeah, shoulder and neck. Another question I actually had uh, for you is we know, like, we kind of know the benefits of doing some internal arts. So, what is for people or for patients, do you think is like the simplest Qigong routine or something they can get into today, or even if it's just one movement?
Sure.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I mean, I would say that so for me, if you're boiling it down to one movement that everybody can benefit from, it's going to be a swing movement.
Okay.
Yeah, and so how about this? Because I just realized that I don't actually have great space to swing around. But if do you mind demonstrating the swings? We've
Sure.
done a lot. So if I were working with you as a patient,
Yeah.
and I,
Yeah.
depending on what you had going on, I might modify this. But basically, I would encourage you to elevate through the top of your head.
Yep.
I'd have you drop your tail so that your low back opens a little bit. Make sure your shoulders are nice and sunk down onto your ribs. And then you're going to make sure your knees are over the balls of your feet. And you've got, actually, with the kind of blurred background, you look really cool right
Yeah.
now. And then what I usually do when I'm teaching anybody who's not like a young martial arts athlete is I have them start by simply rotating their hips so that they're facing a different direction, then shift their weight in that direction. So I would have them kind of turn their hips, shift their weight, turn their hips, shift their weight like that. And that's, I believe, a Chinese, it's a Tai Chi movement called the bear exercise.
Oh yeah. I
You
remember
know,
that.
so
Yeah,
it's like you got bare shoulders, so
yeah.
you're like moving in this kind of bit, but you're
Yeah.
not like extending beyond your hips. And so I
Yeah.
get them to do that for a couple of moments, and then I encourage them to really loosen their arms and shake out, and then make the movement go just a little bit faster so that they're getting this swinging movement through their arms.
Mhm.
And you can have people play it so that I'm just going to turn this so you can see my hips a little bit, so that you're driving your hips through the movement.
Mhm.
And you can also have them do it almost like they're falling asleep on their feet. And it's this very relaxing
Relax.
sort of myofascial stretch. But the sort of swinging movement is found in almost every martial art I've ever done, not even just Chinese stuff. It also, I think, is a perfect movement pattern for sports because I mean, if you think about it, how many sports require you to be able to use your hips this way?
Yep.
From tennis to golf to fighting to everything else. So that's like the sort of go-to. If there was one movement I could teach everybody, that would be on the list.
Yeah, I remember you can adding in the slaps later too.
Yeah, so like in Ba Gua, we often will do this in a much different looking way, although it's the same body mechanics, where it's the same movement, but right? Or you could be doing it in this kind of relaxed, Tai Chi, sort of long-legged way. But yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can utilize swinging and patting and slapping ideas.
Which I love. I do love the patting because it just wakes up the chi.
Yeah.
Yes.
Slapping Qigong is one of the, I think, least common ones outside of our lineage. And it's one of the most useful ones. I mean, it's definitely a form of iron body training.
Yeah.
But it's very, very gentle. You could, like any patient can learn it if you teach it at the right, dosage and volume.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's awesome. I know we did a lot of swinging, but that's something that everyone can do. It's fairly simple, and you kind of need it in all the movement patterns that we have.
As far as basic Qigong sets, that if somebody just wanted to explore Qigong without necessarily having access to a teacher or wanting to spend money online, let me preface this. I highly recommend the both the training Kanita is offering on her video based platform.
Thanks.
Absolutely. I haven't had a chance to tell you, but it's like I think you're doing it right. Like, I think you're teaching the movements well. I think it's, it's simple, elegant, it's a good, you're doing good with it.
I appreciate that feedback from you.
I also, of course, highly recommend internalartsinternational.com. They have a variety of programs that you can purchase with a one-time fee. It's not like you have to subscribe, the way a lot of app-based programs do now. So it's like a one-time fee, and you get permanent access to these really, really professionally done Qigong sets being taught to you by Tom Bizio, who's, really the best in town. So,
yes.
So if you're looking for a great Qigong set to start with, I think that he has several excellent ones. There's Shengyi Neigong, which is it's a movement pattern set that teaches you fundamental Shengyi movement, but it's also just a really good Qigong set for you to open, close, twist, flex, and extend every part of your body. And in many ways, it's the same thing as like the Ba Gua Zhang, which is our foundational training. It's like an alphabet of movement that downloads certain movement patterns. But it's also just good Qigong, makes you healthier.
Yes.
Tom also has the 5-element Qigong.
My favorite. I think that's
wonderful set.
That's one of my favorites. Yeah.
Me too. I teach that to patients on the daily.
It's so good. Yeah.
I'll teach them pieces. Like I'll give it like a prescriptive thing where I'll give them liver and lung or something like that. He also has, I believe, seasonal Qigong, Taoist yoga, and the healing sounds Qigongs on there.
Yes, the Taoist, I would say from experience, the seasonal Qigong has been super interesting because I think I started in the winter and then now going into the spring, and you do notice just
it's different kind of training, right?
It is, and I'm like noticing things in my, especially I talk a lot about this spring and liver. There's always a lot of liver stuff going on this time.
Yeah.
And just like how I'm improving in certain aspects of my health. I was like, okay. And it's, just very simple, like breathing and tension and then all this other stuff. And then the Taoist yoga, I did mostly the seated one. And that was super interesting too with the fascial connections and what it did in that aspect of my body.
It's really interesting because sometimes what appears to be the most subtle or sort of non-moving stuff is actually the deepest movement that you do.
I have so much trouble standing because it's so hard.
Hard.
You
Well,
have to work yourself up
in
to
the
like,
Xingyi lineage, you do the standing
oh,
posture,
I
Santishu,
know.
which it's exquisitely uncomfortable, no doubt about
Yes,
it. But it teaches your body a lot.
it does. That's
It
why,
is
like,
worth
I know I need
it.
it.
Say that. It is worth it. It's just
Yes, yes, yes.
yeah.
But nothing easy
Hard
is
can be good.
yes, hard can be good. You need to do it.
If somebody were looking for resources that were free, they wanted to just try out some Qigong. One thing a lot of people do that I actually don't recommend is they just sort of try to get into Tai Chi online. Tai Chi Chuan online is going to be a difficult proposition for you. I think that that's a little too complex movement pattern to learn. But I do think that there are a lot of really good free follow along sets of the Ba Gua Zhang, for instance, has
yes.
free follow alongs on YouTube. And there's a lot written about the Ba Gua Zhang. So the Ba Gua Zhang is the 8 pieces of brocade or pieces of silk set. It's apocryphally sort of attributed to the general Yue Fei to strengthen his troops. So it was
Okay.
their sort of version, allegedly, of the daily dozen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes, that's something I've seen in Tom's Tooth of a Tiger's.
Yeah, and so Tom has sort of like the juiced up version of that, Tooth of the Tiger's Mouth, and which is also an excellent book for anybody who's interested in looking at self-healing.
Yes.
To promote
me and you are both like,
yeah,
Tom stuff, it's the best. But anyways, we've been talking for an hour. I knew this would happen where I could just talk about martial arts all day with you, Bryan.
I'm sure we could.
But I hope this was useful for everyone about how Qigong, martial arts, internal arts can be amazing to help heal your body and feel great until you're super old, because that's the whole point. So that
all about getting on and off the toilet at the end of the day.
Exactly. I love it. But I appreciate you so much, Bryan, for coming on, chatting with me, showing people how awesome, this all is. So thank you so much for coming in.
It was a real pleasure getting to chat with you, Kanita.
Yes. So I'll see everyone in the next episode.
Woohoo, I'll be watching. All right. It was great to see you. Take care.
You too. I think he'll end the broadcast in a little bit. So